We measured humanity the way we measure all emergent species, coldly, mathematically, without imagination. From the observation spires of the High Concord, suspended in orbit above the third planet of Earth, we dissected them into data streams and probability models. Atmospheric composition, survivable. Industrial output, accelerating. Military cohesion, fragmented. Political unity, negligible. Conclusion, containable. They were soft-bodied bipeds with fragile skin and inefficient lifespans. Their nations fractured over resources and ideology. Their information networks pulsed with disagreement. Even their languages divided them. No hive unity, no emperor genome, no ancestral war instinct encoded across generations, as ours had been within the sovereign archives of the apex dominion. Our analysts labeled them emotionally unstable but technologically promising. Emotion, in our doctrine, is exploitable. From orbit, our surveyors observed their cities glitter against oceans like neuroclusters firing in isolation. We watched their councils argue policy while their streets filled with protesters demanding justice from their own leaders. We intercepted transmissions of art, music, satire, expressions of internal discord broadcast freely into the void. No unified war doctrine, no ritualized obedience, no planetary command structure. They were chaotic, inefficient, divided. And yet, every extinction simulation returned the same anomaly. We ran 100,000 predictive models. In scenarios of orbital suppression, they fragmented at first, exactly as expected. Nations blamed one another, resources strained, panic flared. But then the curve bent upward. Retaliation output increased exponentially. Innovation accelerated under pressure. Rival states merged defense protocols. Civilian industries retooled into war production within weeks. Casualties did not reduce resistance, they amplified it. Corner a human polity, and it fractures.
Threaten the species itself, and it coheres. This contradiction unsettled our logic engines. The first envoy we dispatched to Earth descended over a coastal metropolis, where oceans met towers of glass. He expected ritual submission displays. He expected fear. He received negotiation. Human representatives greeted him not with prostration, but with questions. They requested technological exchange frameworks, cultural agreements, mutual defense pacts, offered as equals. Equals. When the envoy returned to Concord space, his vocal sacs trembled, a physiological response we had not observed since the border purchase of the Varelian Wars. "They fear us," he reported before the assembled High Council. Murmurs of satisfaction rippled through the chamber. Fear is stability. Fear is control. But he continued. "They fear us," he repeated. "But they do not fear death." Laughter echoed against crystalline walls. All sentient organisms fear death. It is the fundamental lever of obedience. Remove survival probability, and resistance collapses. It is biological law. Yet the envoy displayed recordings. Human emergency responders entering collapsing structures to retrieve strangers, soldiers shielding civilians with their own bodies, medical workers remaining in contagion zones long after evacuation protocols advised retreat. One recording in particular silenced the chamber. A human vessel, primitive, chemically propelled, malfunctioned during atmospheric ascent. Catastrophic failure imminent. The crew had time to eject. They did not. Instead, they remained aboard to redirect the falling craft away from a populated district below. Impact probability for personal survival? 0. Population saved? Thousands. The chamber quieted. Our behavioral specialists argued this was irrational heroism, a vestige of tribal bonding instincts, a developmental phase they would outgrow. But then came the final data fragment. Intercepted civilian transmission from the aftermath of a natural disaster.
A human child, displaced and weeping, asked a rescue worker if her family would return. The worker, exhausted, injured, uncertain, answered with absolute conviction, "We don't leave each other behind." The phrase propagated across their networks, shared millions of times, adopted by rival nations simultaneously. We recalibrated the extinction simulations once more, this time factoring not fear of death, but fear of abandonment. The retaliation curve tripled. Humans did not fight hardest when their own lives were threatened. They fought hardest when others were. Their cohesion was not enforced by authority, it was forged by attachment.
To harm one was to summon many. To threaten many was to awaken all. Within the Concord chamber, some counselors dismissed the findings. Emotional volatility, they argued, makes species predictable, exploitable. Push them into despair and they collapse. But our envoy spoke one final time before adjournment. If we ever give them a common grief, he said, they will turn it into unity. We archived the warning. We categorized humanity as Tier 3 expansion candidate. We authorized observation fleets to maintain silent orbit. And we comforted ourselves with doctrine. Every species fears death. It is the foundation of control. We would soon learn our error. Humanity does not fear death as we understand it. They fear losing each other. And when a civilization values connection more than survival, the mathematics of conquest begin to fail. We did not yet know how costly that miscalculation would become. But in the shadows of our certainty, the first variable had already shifted. The war did not begin with a declaration. It began with paperwork. In the outer reaches of the Perseus Drift, beyond the glittering trade corridors and diplomatic theaters, our patrol fleets conducted what we classified as a minor compliance enforcement, a routine assertion of Dominion authority, a reminder to emerging species that expansion required permission.
The human convoy was slow. Civilian-class hulls, cargo carriers, and long-range transports marked with humanitarian registry codes. They drifted near a disputed transit lane recently annexed by the sovereign mandate of the Apex Dominion. Our enforcement cruiser transmitted standard inspection orders. The humans replied with identification packets and cargo manifests, medical supplies, agricultural substrates, habitation modules, colonists relocating deeper into frontier systems, families. Inspection was required regardless. Authority must be visible to remain unquestioned. When the convoy adjusted vector to bypass our patrol perimeter, the commander interpreted it as defiance. A warning shot lanced across vacuum, a controlled discharge meant to carve silence into resistance. The convoy did not scatter. Instead, they transmitted a single message on open frequency. We are civilians. No aggression, no defiance, only statement. Our commander recorded it as non-compliance. A second warning shot was issued, closer this time. Still, the convoy maintained trajectory. Under Dominion Protocol 7A, deterrence escalation was authorized. The first transport fractured under directed plasma impact. Its hull ruptured like fragile ceramic. Atmosphere vented into void in a glittering bloom. The remaining vessels attempted evasive maneuvers, clumsy, desperate. They were destroyed within 7 minutes. 53,000 human lives extinguished. In our official archives, the incident was logged as localized enforcement casualty event, statistically insignificant, galactic order preserved. But we miscalculated the human relationship with information. The final transmission, we are civilians, did not die with the convoy. It propagated. Human vessels, even civilian ones, operated on what they termed open networks. Redundant data bursts transmitted in every direction, automatically mirrored across relays beyond our suppression radius.
Within minutes, fragments of the engagement leaked beyond Dominion sensors. Within one planetary rotation of Earth, every human settlement, from orbital habitats to lunar colonies, had seen the footage. Children watched the plasma lances. Workers replayed the final message. Families counted the names of the lost. We anticipated outrage. Our diplomatic corps prepared for condemnation speeches, sanction threats, emergency assemblies in the Concord chamber above Apex Prime. We expected emotional volatility, anger, perhaps even reckless mobilization. What we received was silence. No fleets mobilized from human dockyards, no retaliatory strikes. Their ambassador to the Concord entered session as scheduled. He bowed with customary restraint. He spoke of trade tariffs and agricultural exchange rates. His composure unsettled some of our junior counselors. Trade continued uninterrupted. Human merchant vessels docked at Dominion ports. Cultural exchanges proceeded. Scientific delegations collaborated as though nothing had occurred. Our strategists celebrated the outcome. Humanity had recognized the hierarchy of power. They had absorbed the loss and chosen survival over pride. Emotionally unstable, yes, but ultimately pragmatic. Yet the data streams told a different story. Industrial output across Earth's major manufacturing blocks increased by 17% within 2 cycles. Civilian shipyards quietly expanded capacity. Energy allocation shifted from luxury sectors towards research and propulsion development. Defense budgets rose, not dramatically, not provocatively, but consistently. Alliances between historically rival human states solidified under new mutual defense frameworks. And still, No declarations, no threats. We intercepted internal human communications expecting rage. Instead, we found coordination, logistics planning, supply chain diversification, emergency response restructuring. They were not lashing out. They were preparing.
Weeks later, our intelligence division compiled a montage of speeches delivered by human leaders across continents. We expected fiery rhetoric. We expected calls for vengeance. Instead, in capital after capital, the message was identical in tone. Calm, measured. A leader standing before a sea of silent citizens said only, "Remember." Another, addressing a grieving colony, repeated it, "Remember." No elaboration, no timeline for retaliation, just a directive. Remember the names. Remember the faces. Remember the message. Our sociologists struggled to interpret the minimalism. Without an explicit call to action, how could mobilization occur? But in the weeks that followed, remembrance became ritual. Memorial installations appeared across human territories. Digital archives preserved every individual lost in the Perseus Drift. Their open networks transformed grief into permanence. We observed something subtle yet profound. Their divisions narrowed. Political factions that had once opposed military spending voted unanimously for expanded defensive research. Media outlets that had criticized leadership now reinforced unity. Grief did not fragment them. It aligned them. Within the High Council chamber of Apex Prime, some argued we should capitalize on the moment, apply additional pressure while they remained subdued. Others cautioned restraint, citing the anomaly curves from earlier extinction models. I reviewed the simulation archives personally. In scenarios where humanity was humiliated but left intact, resentment simmered. In scenarios where humanity was struck repeatedly, cohesion intensified beyond predictive thresholds. But this scenario, measured provocation followed by silence, produced a delayed spike, a curve that rose slowly, then sharply. We had not crushed them. We had given them a shared wound. And wounds, in human culture, do not fade. They scar.
Months after the Perseus Drift incident, our patrol fleets reported an increase in human-civilian traffic along formerly contested corridors. Larger vessels, better shield matrices, improved navigation algorithms. Not aggressive, prepared. The quiet stretched on, and some among us grew complacent. "They have accepted their place," one war chancellor declared. "The lesson is learned." But I continued to monitor their open networks. The memorial broadcasts never ceased, and beneath each name displayed across their planetary grids, a single word pulsed in soft light. Remember. We mistook silence for submission. We mistook patience for weakness. We did not understand that humans do not forget injustice. They store it, and when they decide to act, it is not in anger, it is in resolve. The Perseus Drift was, in our records, a minor enforcement action. In theirs, it became a vow, and vows, unlike outrage, do not fade with time. They mature. We learned the phrase too late. The second enforcement action was not meant to escalate the situation. It was, in the language of our admirals, a reinforcement of precedent. The Perseus Drift had demonstrated our willingness to act. The refugee flotilla near the Epsilon corridor was merely clarification. They were human vessels again, overcrowded, improvised, carrying survivors from frontier settlements destabilized by our new territorial boundaries, families seeking relocation permits beyond Dominion patrol grids. They did not possess weapons capable of threatening a cruiser. They did not possess shields capable of surviving one. Our patrol commander cited security uncertainty and ordered a disabling barrage. The first strike shattered propulsion. The second ruptured habitation rings. Escape pods blossomed like scattered spores into vacuum. Then our gunners fired again. The justification was recorded, potential insurgent transport risk. The footage was undeniable, and this time the humans did not remain silent.
The ambassador from Earth attended the Concord assembly as scheduled. He did not raise his voice. He did not tremble. He carried with him a small data slate, unremarkable in form. He approached the central dais of the chamber above Apex Prime and placed the slate upon it. "Before proceedings continue," he said, "you will watch." No one denied him. Curiosity is a flaw even in advanced species. The chamber lights dimmed as the projection filled the air. We saw the refugee vessels, overloaded, patched, scarred by long travel. We saw children floating near viewport glass. We heard the panic in civilian channels as Dominion plasma lanced across hulls. Names appeared in sequence beneath the images. Age, origin settlement, occupation, infant, teacher, agricultural engineer. The projection did not end quickly. It forced us to remain, to witness every second, every face. When it concluded, the ambassador retrieved the slate. His eyes, small and forward-facing, scanned the chamber. Earth will respond. Not retaliate, not protest. Respond. Then he turned and exited without further word. For 72 standard hours, nothing visible occurred. Then the Dominion relay network began to fail. Signal latency increased along major corridors, supply manifests corrupted, navigation buoys transmitted false gravitational readings. At first, we assumed technical malfunction. Then autonomous defense grids, systems refined across centuries, started behaving erratically. Firing solutions miscalculated. Target acquisition loops reset mid-engagement. Our cyber command traced the intrusions. The origin signatures were fragmented, layered through civilian infrastructure, masked within what we had once dismissed as inefficient open architecture. Human networks were not centralized. There was no singular control node to decapitate. They were everywhere. Each colony, each ship, each research cluster functioning as independent yet synchronized entities. Decentralized did not mean primitive.
It meant resilient. Within hours, Dominion supply routes fractured, merchant convoys stalled as routing algorithms collapsed. Defense stations isolated themselves in paranoia, severing external communication to avoid infiltration, only to render themselves blind. And then their fleets arrived. Not in overwhelming numbers, not in triumphant formation. Small strike groups emerged from slipspace with unnerving precision. They targeted relay hubs, military shipyards, ammunition depots, command and control nexuses. They did not strike cities. They did not bombard cultural archives or civilian habitats. Even as our systems faltered, their targeting algorithms distinguished between military and non-combatant infrastructure with surgical exactitude. We monitored one engagement over the industrial moon of Varix Theta. Human destroyers disabled orbital cannons within minutes. Instead of collapsing the adjacent habitat ring, an easy secondary casualty, they deployed boarding teams to manually evacuate civilian workers before detonating the munition stockpiles. They were attacking us and saving us simultaneously. The High War Council of the Apex Dominion convened an emergency session. Holographic projections flickered with cascading red alerts. Admirals demanded authorization for total war doctrine, planetary sterilization protocols. But the data stream from intercepted human communications froze the chamber into uneasy silence. Across encrypted channels, across military and civilian networks alike, one phrase repeated. Now we stop being civilized. The words spread like a pulse through their fleets. At first, we interpreted it as abandonment of restraint, a declaration of brutality. We prepared for indiscriminate destruction. But their definition of uncivilized differed from ours. They did not begin targeting civilians. They began removing mercy from military engagements. Dominion cruisers that once would have been disabled were now dismantled entirely.
Strategic reserves were obliterated rather than merely disrupted. High-ranking officers were captured and publicly tried under human war crime statutes broadcast across galactic channels. They stripped us of the advantage of impunity. And yet, even then, they issued evacuation warnings before orbital strikes. Civilian transit corridors were left open. Medical vessels were granted safe passage. Our analysts struggled to reconcile the contradiction. How could a species declare itself no longer civilized while demonstrating greater adherence to ethical warfare than we had ever practiced? The answer emerged slowly, painfully. For humans, civilization was not the absence of force, it was the presence of mercy. And mercy, once withdrawn, is not chaos, it is clarity. They were no longer attempting to preserve our pride. They were no longer shielding us from the consequences of our own doctrine. They were dismantling our capacity to harm. Above Virex Gate, a Dominion fleet attempted to regroup under emergency command encryption. Human strike craft disabled propulsion, boarded the flagship, and evacuated every non-combatant technician before venting the weapons core into space. The message transmitted afterward was brief. You targeted refugees. Nothing more. The galaxy watched. Minor species long subdued under Dominion expansion mandates observed the precision of human retaliation. They noted the distinction between military accountability and civilian protection. And alliances shifted, quietly at first. Within the War Council chamber, I reviewed the footage of human Marines escorting our civilians through corridors still echoing with battle alarms. One Marine carried a Dominion hatchling in armored arms, shielding it from debris as explosions rippled behind them. This was their version of no longer being civilized, focused, relentless, unforgiving toward aggression, but never toward the innocent.
Our earlier assumption that humanity's empathy was fragility collapsed under mounting evidence. Their empathy was conditional. It extended generously until violated. And we had violated it twice. The phrase echoed through our intelligence briefings. Now we stop being civilized. It was not a descent into barbarism. It was the removal of patience. Within one standard week, half of our outer military infrastructure lay in ruins. Supply lines we had relied upon for centuries no longer functioned. Expansion fleets recalled to defend core territories arrived to find their navigational systems compromised before engagement even began. And still, human warships avoided planetary bombardment. They could have glassed entire colonies. They possessed the capability. Our sensors confirmed it. They did not. That restraint terrified us more than annihilation would have. An enemy seeking destruction can be deterred through mutual devastation. An enemy seeking accountability cannot, because accountability requires survival. In the shadow of burning shipyards and silent relay stations, the War Chancellor whispered what none of us wished to articulate. We have misjudged them. Yes, we had measured humanity by their divisions, their protests, their emotional volatility. We failed to measure the moment those divisions would dissolve. The Epsilon Corridor was not merely another enforcement action. It was the catalyst. We had given them a second grief. And this time, they did not choose silence. They chose response. And as Dominion strongholds flickered into darkness one by one, we began to understand a truth more destabilizing than defeat. Humanity's civility had never been weakness. It had been mercy. And mercy, once withdrawn, reshapes galaxies. We had conquered 12 civilizations before humanity discovered faster-than-light travel. That fact was repeated often in the early days of the conflict, like a charm against doubt.
Our fleets were superior in tonnage, in raw firepower, in centuries of refined doctrine. Our war academies studied extermination as an art form. Our admirals had reduced stellar empires to compliance long before humans split the atom. History was on our side. But history, we would learn, is useless against a species that rewrites itself mid-battle. The first major engagement of what our archives now designate the adaptive war took place along the industrial corridor of Hellion Reach. We deployed 3 capital fleets, expecting decisive confrontation. Humans responded with fewer vessels, lighter hulls, modular construction, unconventional formations. We prepared for frontal engagement. They targeted our logistics. Before the first broadside exchanged, our munitions transports reported navigational errors. Fuel convoys diverted by falsified star maps. Supply depots preemptively sabotaged through embedded cyber infiltration weeks before hostilities escalated. They had not just studied our fleet composition, they had studied our assumptions. When we reinforced shield arrays with harmonic upgrades, human strike craft altered weapon frequencies within days, not months, days. Their research divisions operated in live synchronization with the battlefield. Field data fed directly into production lines. Our admirals called it reckless improvisation, but the results were undeniable. We encrypted our communications with quantum cascade locks refined across centuries. Within 2 cycles, human operatives bypassed them, not through brute force decryption, but by infiltrating civilian subcontractors who maintained our peripheral systems. We centralized command authority to prevent further breach. They decentralized theirs. When our targeting algorithms prioritized human command ships, those ships ceased to function as singular control nodes. Fleet coordination distributed across hundreds of smaller vessels, each capable of autonomous tactical leadership. Destroy one, and the rest compensated instantly. It was like striking a swarm that learned with every blow. In emergency briefings on Apex Prime, our admiral's tone shifted from confident to cautious.
Casualty projections no longer declined after tactical adjustments, they increased. And yet human fleet numbers did not vastly outmatch ours. What outmatched us was velocity of adaptation. At the Battle of Karth Vale, we expected to trap a human task force within a debris-choked stellar graveyard. Our minds seeded the approach vector, heavy cruisers concealed behind fractured asteroid masses. The trap triggered flawlessly. Human ships detonated under initial volleys, whole fragments spiraled into vacuum. For a moment, our bridge crews celebrated. Then their smaller vessels dispersed, not in retreat, but in coordinated microjumps calibrated through chaotic gravitational interference we believed impossible to navigate. They re-emerged inside our formation, targeting propulsion arrays instead of weapons. They did not attempt annihilation, they immobilized. Boarding actions followed. Captured footage from Karth Vale remains mandatory study in our war colleges. It shows human marines advancing through ruptured corridors of a Dominion cruiser, atmosphere vented, fire spreading. Yet before securing weapons base, the humans sealed breaches in civilian habitation sectors. They deployed portable life support emitters. They escorted our technicians and offspring to protected compartments. One recording, replayed endlessly in War Council analysis, shows a human marine tethered to vacuum, bracing a failing bulkhead while Dominion hatchlings crawl past toward evacuation shuttles. He could have advanced. He chose to stabilize. Our analysts could not reconcile it. Why preserve enemy civilians during assault? Why expend tactical advantage on humanitarian containment? The answer emerged in intercepted battlefield communications. Secure non-combatants first, protective at corridor.
Home extends to all protected. They were not driven by conquest metrics, they were driven by protection thresholds. In Dominion doctrine, war is expansion. Territory acquired equals success. In human doctrine, war is defense of home. And home, we discovered too late, is not a planet. It is a perimeter of responsibility. Every system under their declared protection became, in their perception, an extension of Earth. When minor species petitioned them for assistance against Dominion reprisals, human fleets responded, not for resource gain, not for annexation, but for obligation. They fought as though every civilian, human or otherwise, were part of their collective. That made them tactically unpredictable. Traditional deterrence failed. Threaten destruction, and they hardened. Offer negotiation under coercion, and they documented the coercion. Strike supply depots, and they rerouted through civilian infrastructure impossible to fully suppress without triggering broader galactic condemnation. Each time we adapted, they adapted faster. When we deployed autonomous hunter-killer drones to compensate for crew losses, humans reprogrammed captured units and turned them against our own formations. When we shifted to attrition warfare, targeting long-term economic depletion, they increased production efficiency under pressure, civilian populations volunteering for extended industrial cycles without mandate. Our morale projections faltered. Dominion citizens had long trusted in inevitable victory. That trust began to fracture as footage from Karth Vale circulated through underground networks. Our people saw human marines carrying Dominion wounded through smoke. They saw enemy soldiers shielding children. The narrative of barbaric insurgents dissolved. Fear replaced arrogance, not fear of extinction, fear of inadequacy. Because how do you defeat an enemy who refuses to become the monster you expected?
At a strategic summit convened within the high citadel of the Apex Dominion, a senior tactician articulated the realization none wished to voice. They are not trying to win territory. They are trying to remove our ability to threaten. That objective is more dangerous than conquest. Conquest seeks dominance. Removal seeks transformation. The longer the war continued, the more our admirals hesitated. Each offensive risked not just defeat, but exposure of our own ethical bankruptcy. Human strike reports were transparent, publicly archived, every action justified, every civilian safeguarded where possible. We began to understand that humanity's restraint was not a temporary strategy, it was identity. And identity does not erode under pressure, it clarifies. At Karth Vale's conclusion, our flagship attempted a final self-destruct protocol rather than surrender sensitive technology. Human boarding teams disabled the core and transmitted a message before withdrawing. We are not here to erase you. We are here to stop you. The distinction haunted our command networks, because if they had sought erasure, we could respond in kind. But they sought limitation. They sought accountability. And accountability spreads like contagion. Minor species, once cowed by Dominion expansion, began questioning our authority. Some quietly aligned with human defensive coalitions. Our empire, built on centuries of dominance, confronted an adversary that did not crave what we valued. They did not covet our worlds. They coveted security for themselves and others, and that made them relentless. In final review of Karth Vale, our admirals conceded a truth recorded now in restricted archives. We miscalculated not their strength, but their motive. We assumed they fought for survival alone. They fought for each other, for allies, for strangers who asked for help.
In Dominion doctrine, war is expansion. In human doctrine, war is defense of home.
And when home expands to include the vulnerable beyond your borders, there is no strategic boundary to exploit. That was our greatest miscalculation. Because we had mistaken compassion for fragility, we did not understand that compassion, weaponized by resolve, is the most adaptive force in the galaxy. And by the time we realized it, the war had already shifted beyond our control. Above Apex Prime, our jewel of the galaxy, the skies burned with tension. The capital world of Apex Prime, the heart of our empire, gleamed beneath domed cities and orbital shipyards designed to project our power across the stars. Pride and arrogance radiated from every spire, every fleet arrayed in meticulous formation, every weapon calibrated to perfection. We expected ceremony, spectacle, or at least hesitation. Instead, silence fell. From slipspace, human fleets emerged without fanfare. Not a single chorus of victory, not a single triumphant flare. Vessels glided into system vectors with disciplined precision, engines muted, weapons calibrated yet unflinching. Their formation defied our tactical predictions. The flagship hovered at the edge of orbital coverage, an elegant silhouette against Apex Prime's blue atmosphere. Then came the transmission. The voice was calm, measured, unemotional. Surrender your expansion mandates. Recognize sovereign equality. Stand down your enforcement fleets. We laughed at first. Surely this was bluff. Surely they would not strike at the very heart of our civilization. But moments later, the first orbital shipyard went dark. Systems failed. Automated production lines collapsed. Defense arrays flickered as synchronized cyber and kinetic strikes disabled each node in a sequence we could not anticipate. We watched in disbelief as their drones neutralized our orbital weapons without collateral damage to civilian habitats. Each shipyard was incapacitated, not destroyed. Civilian domes remained intact. Cultural archives remained untouched.
They could have erased us, yet they did not. Our war chancellor demanded the activation of planetary devastation protocols. The vote was swift, the chamber filled with urgency and fear. Authorize eradication of the invader, one counselor urged. Strike first, erase first, ensure survival. The vote failed. For the first time in Dominion history, fear overpowered pride. Our advisors, our admirals, and our strategists trembled as realization settled in. Humanity did not seek our extinction. They did not desire to annihilate our cities, to exterminate our people. They sought something far more insidious: accountability. And accountability, unlike annihilation, transforms, it shapes, it disciplines, it forces reflection. Extinction ends suffering. Accountability ensures it persists until correction is inevitable. Every orbital weapon, every tactical advantage, every fleet we had amassed now stood exposed to a species that would wield power not to destroy, but to constrain, to make us accountable for every violation of our doctrines, every abuse of expansionist power, every transgression committed against the defenseless. We realized then that we had misread the human paradigm entirely. Their war was not about territory, not about resources, not about domination. It was about principle. Principle enforced with precision, adaptability, and unyielding resolve. And for the first time, we comprehended the terror of that truth. Because extinction is finite, accountability is infinite. From the central dais, the High Council watched as the flagship sent a final coordinate to our command networks, a reminder that the humans had total capacity, total awareness, and total moral authority. Our pride had guided our fleets, our policies, and our arrogance. Now, for the first time, it guided nothing. We had faced species before, we had crushed them, we had erased cultures with impunity, but never had we faced an enemy who defined victory not in annihilation, but in rectitude.
And never had we feared that more than death itself. Above Apex Prime, humanity's fleets glided silently, poised, disciplined, unstoppable, and we understood fully that we had underestimated the true measure of their power. They were not just fighters, they were arbiters, and the galaxy would never be the same. The surrender was signed not in chains, but in silence. Human diplomats returned to the Concord chamber we once dominated, the same chamber where we had once dictated terms to subjugated species, where we had once framed treaties as ultimatums,
where our banners of authority had hung unchallenged, reflecting light off crystalline walls. Now, the humans entered without ceremony, without flourish, no gloating, no triumphal gestures. They carried nothing but data slates, schedules, and meticulously prepared terms. They presented conditions focused on reconstruction, on the protection of minor species previously crushed or enslaved under Dominion expansion, on mutual defense networks, inclusive rather than exclusive, on accountability frameworks to prevent abuses we had once treated as operational necessities. We had expected vengeance. We had expected humiliation. We had expected emotional displays befitting the losses we inflicted. We received conditions. The Council, once united by arrogance and certainty, hesitated. One after another, advisors and generals debated quietly, the weight of human clarity pressing against centuries of Dominion doctrine. Every rule we had relied upon, strength, fear, domination, crumbled under the simplicity of their demands. Our sociologists and strategic analysts attempted to define the human anomaly, to explain why a species could endure staggering loss, witness devastation, yet emerge cohesive and unbroken. Their conclusion was deceptively simple. Humans endure suffering without surrendering identity. They fight fiercely without abandoning compassion. They unify not under a ruler or a doctrine, but under shared grief.
We observed footage of their memorials, streams of images and recordings broadcast through their networks, candles burning in silence, names recited aloud, projected across cities and settlements, tears shed openly, collectively, spaceships circling destroyed convoys, honoring the lost. Every human citizen who mourned became a node in an invisible network of remembrance. We understood then what made them unstoppable. To harm one human is to awaken billions. To threaten their future is to forge their unity. The apex dominion, once feared across the galaxy, had been studied, obeyed, and mirrored by lesser species. And now, the galaxy turned its gaze on humanity, not because humanity had conquered us, but because they chose not to, because they restrained themselves, even in war, even in retaliation, because they could. And in that restraint lies the greatest power we have ever witnessed. We realized, finally, that our strength, measured in fleets and doctrines, was nothing compared to the quiet, enduring, inexorable force of human identity. We had taught ourselves a lesson. Dominance may command obedience. Compassion, preserved under fire, commands reverence. And the galaxy, silent and watchful, began to learn. The humans did not gloat. They did not celebrate. They simply endured. And in doing so, they reshaped the universe itself.